Hello everybody, it's Foxy speaking, and welcome to Foxy's Fun Inspirational Chats. And today I will be your host. In this episode, I'm going to be talking to you about a story which actually was real of three endearing and interesting centenarians in Britain, full of wisdom. They were absolutely full of wisdom. These three centenarians were Cliff Crozier, John Millington Denerly, and Amelia Tereza Harper. All of them are England, although Amelia, or Tereza as she was known, she is half Czechoslovakian and very, very much of Czech ancestry, as well as British, but very, very British and also very Czech too, which a lot of you may not have known, but I certainly know so. Yes, they're not. These are all three real people. They're not fictional. Absolutely real people. I think Amelia's still with us, but I don't. But sadly, Cliff and John are no longer with us, I'm afraid. Ouch! Itchy nose. Sorry. Oh gosh. No, a drink will not come out of my nose, don't worry, because of itchy gets no. Yes, they were wonderful people, absolutely interesting, so endearing, honestly. Yes, I mean Cliff Crozier was the known centenarian from the Wirral region. And the Wirral region is a great deal of Merseyside and Liverpool, which was where Cliff Crozier came from. Born in Birkenhead in the Wirral in Cheshire. Also parts of the Wirral are in bits of Cheshire, just to say. I think many of you know, but those of you who do not know England very well, bits of the Wirral are also in Cheshire, the Wirral region. And Birkenhead is in Cheshire, just outside of Merseyside, which is where Cliff Crozier was born, to a well-respected father and a lovely mother. Apart from being born during the First World War and the time he was in college, he lived there most of his life. And also World War II, apart from that, and also the Spanish flu pandemic, he'd lived in Birkenhead all his life. Pretty much he was based in the Wirral pretty much all his life. Schooled in Birkenhead and went to college in Birkenhead to train as a teacher. He was qualified as a teacher in the very late 1930s. But before long, after starting up his teaching career, he was called for service in World War II. So he enlisted into the British Army in World War II, and he fought throughout in the Second World War from 1939 until 1945, when World War ended. Well, certainly on the VE day of the war, yes. And after that, he went back into teaching. He was married during the Second World War, married to a very lovely Canadian lady, Renee, who was hailing all the way from Montreal in Canada. Very pretty Montreal, actually, in Canada. And also my mother went to Montreal many times years ago now, but I wasn't there with her at the time when she went. But she did tell me what a wonderful city it was, and she very, very much favoured the city, and she was recommending it to me as a child, and when I was a teenager. She spoke to me about it quite a lot, a bit, when I told her about Cliff Crozier and his wife. Because I found out about Cliff Crozier, she spoke to me about Montreal before I heard of Cliff Crozier, and after I found out about Cliff Crozier, I did tell her about that too, about where his wife came from, Montreal too. And yes, I've heard many wonderful stories of Montreal, Canada. But yes, getting to the story, I should not be rambling off subject. Naughty me. Where was I? Yes, okay. Married to a Canadian lady, Renee from Montreal. Oh gosh, I was just repeating it. Oh gosh, I'm flaming silly, aren't I? But yes, they were married in 1940 during World War II. I think he had a bit of, I think he was on a leave week, I think, from the army when he and Renee got married. But it wasn't until 1946 when they had their first child, welcoming a daughter, Carolyn, who was born in 1946. He only ever had one child, and that was it. But after the war in 1945, he took up his teaching role again. And then after many years of teaching, in Greasby Junior School, actually, it was Greasby Juniors, after years of teaching, after a few years, he received a higher promotion to actually become the headmaster of Greasby Junior School. He became headmaster, I should think, in the 1950s or 1960s, and he took that promotion until his retirement in 1978. And but sadly, Renee didn't go back to Montreal. Very sadly, even when they could fly, she sadly couldn't. Unfortunately, because Renee very, very painfully, it pains me to say this, and I think it also pained Cliff if he spoke to him about it, or his wife when she was alive. Renee had heart ailments, which is very sad, I'm afraid. Well, she had it most of her life, heart ailments. But what was impressive was, despite her heart ailments, their marriage lasted for 50 years, because Renee sadly died in 1990, when she was only, I think, about 73, I think it was, when she died. She lived to about the same age Edmund did, which was 73, because Edmund was that age when he died. 73 years of age, which is much too early, as you know. But very, very sadly, which actually did affect Cliff a lot when Renee died. And but after Renee's death, in 1992, it had been about 2 years since his wife's death, he actually went to Montreal for the first time in his life, Montreal in Canada. He visited Montreal every single year, Cliff Crozier did, from 1992 until 2010, when he was nearly 95. Which is quite impressive. He was still flying. I mean, with the trouble of travel insurance and everything, oh gosh, I hope he was up for it even into his 90s and 80s. Because he did it until he was nearly 95, travelling back and forth to Montreal from England, just to say. But after his but he stopped going to Montreal when he was about 95. But there are people who fly abroad, it's been known, people flying abroad going on cruises till they're in their late 90s or even hundreds. Impressive. But after that, he just resided in Birkenhead. But I think he did do other things, but he was a man whose age you could not believe, actually, Cliff Crozier. When Cliff Crozier celebrated his 100th birthday in September of 2015, and at the time of his 100th birthday in 2015, Cliff said, "Age is just numbers, you keep going. My daughter says I should get a Zimmer frame, but they're for old people." At 100, he was walking totally unaided at that point. It wasn't till he got to about some time after, on his 101st birthday, I mean, he did have a walking stick when he was 100, but he very rarely used it when he was that age. And even when he was 101, he had a walking stick, but again, at 101, he very, very rarely used his walking stick actually. He was really quite an impressive man, to be honest with you. Walking probably like a man in his very late 60s, and unaided pretty much, or sometimes with the stick, but walking like a man much younger than his age, probably say like 30 years younger. He didn't look 30 years younger than his age, but he was walking like a man, say at least 30 years his junior, when he was aged 100 and certainly 101. And a month after his 100th birthday, in October 2015, he took a holiday with his daughter abroad to New York City in America, and to fly that far at 100 is nothing but impressive. If anyone is asking me about that, I think it is nothing but impressive for a centenarian to fly as far as New York, all the way from England, just after turning 100 years of age. He was really a man whose age you just could not believe, Cliff Crozier. Yeah. And but they did come back after a few weeks to England, where he celebrated Christmas of 2015. In the autumn, in May of 2016, in the very late spring, just before the summer of 2016, Cliff Crozier went in a biplane for the first time in over 70 years. And his flight instructor was shocked when he met him, and when the flight instructor he met learned how old he was. He said he had many new passengers, former war veterans, also now passengers to fly in the planes just for the fun of it. He said there are many in their 90s who needed to be helped into the cockpit, but Cliff Crozier, at 100, just about 3 months shy of turning 101, he clambered in and out of the biplane cockpit without any help at all. The pilot didn't even have to help him into the cockpit, and he was 100. The biplane pilot said that you would never believe Cliff was 100 years old. And Cliff, stating the biplane experience for the first time in more than 70 years, is very exciting, because it had been that long since he'd flown in a biplane. Cliff himself, yes. And yes, and shortly after his 101st birthday in the autumn of 2016, he, along with John Millington Denerly and Amelia Tereza Harper, appeared on Life Lessons for 100-year-olds, which is a YouTube video on YouTube. He was interviewed by Life Hunters at that point, and it was hugely interesting. Yes, it was absolutely hugely interesting. After that, a year after that, well, less than a year after that, there was a picture of him when he was then 101, nearly 102. I mean, he then at that point, after turning 101, he started walking with either a Zimmer frame or a walking stick, but he didn't even use a wheelchair. And he was standing up, with the Zimmer put to one side, holding only one handle of it and parked the other bit. The other handle probably too far for him to reach on his right hand. Standing up, very upright, and it was like 101 not out. Well, he was definitely not out at 101. And in November of 2017, shortly after his 102nd birthday, he became present for turning on the Morton Christmas lights for the Christmas festive season. Then in November 2018, at the fine age of 103, he became guest of honour at the Birkenhead Senior Secondary School in commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the signing of the armistice ending World War I. On the 6th of September, in September 2019, Cliff Crozier celebrated what would have been, unknown to him, his final 104th birthday. Still looking very good for it, but had aged slightly before he died. But then sadly, 6 months later, Cliff Crozier sadly passed away at the age of 104 and a half. He would have been 105 in early September, but he was 104 when he died, which is again a fantastic age to live to. He did very, very well, actually, Cliff Crozier. Living to 104 or any age older than 95 is nothing but astonishing. I mean, I do say it very much is. Now, getting to the very next centenarian, John Millington Denerly. Some of you will probably think of him as an exception. And he was born in January of 1914. John Millington Denerly was born at he says he was born at an early age before World War One in Denton in Greater Manchester, but then he moved over to Liverpool when he was aged 10 in 1924 with his parents. And it's very funny when I heard about him. He was a boy who actually wasted a lot of time in his childhood. Too much entertainment. He did too many things entertaining and lacking his important studies almost completely in his childhood, and listening to the radio all night long from midnight right through to breakfast time as a young child. And he wasn't very attentive in his school days whenever he went to class. Late for school, huge lack of attention, and really not very attentive. But he didn't do too bad in the latter part of his education, but impressively did receive a degree of being a pharmacist, actually, just to say. He became a pharmacist in the 1930s, but then war was declared, as you know, 1939, and he went in the RAF in World War II and said it was an adventure more than a penalty. And then after the war he married his wife Audrey, who sadly died only like a few years before he did. And oh gosh, where was I? Yeah. And he and Audrey had one child, a son named Paul Denerly. They had one son, and after he retired, he and his wife retired, they moved to be close to their son, Paul. But then later on they moved over to Eastbourne, in the latter part of his life, until, very sadly, until John died. But in April 2016, 2 years before John's death, he was present at the 150th opening anniversary of Eastbourne Pier, at the fine age of 102. And then in the autumn of 2016, months after, he was interviewed by Life Hunters and was reportedly using an iPad at the age of 102, ordering his Tesco shopping online, and he went out and everything, but his iPad, it was his 21st century toy, reportedly using it when he was 102. I mean, he loved his iPad. He used to spend an awful lot of time on it, actually. And yes, very sadly, John died on the 1st of December 2018, aged 104, actually just over a month shy of his 105th birthday. But he did very well, actually, and he's very much missed by his family, not surprisingly. And last but not least, we've got Amelia Tereza Harper. Amelia Tereza Harper born in 1913. I think she's actually still alive, actually, because there's been no report about her death. I mean, she could have died, but may not have been reported. But let's just assume she's still alive until I actually hear something about her death. Born in England in 1913, born to a half Czechoslovakian family, and she was living with her grandparents in Czechoslovakia in her early childhood, now Czech Republic, because sadly her father was a prisoner of war during World War I. After the end of World War I, she reunited with her father and her mother from her grandparents after he was released from the war, and spent the remaining years of England, remaining of her years living in England. And she got married when she was only 16 years of age, which was in 1929, until her husband died in the early 1970s, stating she wanted to marry a handsome man and a man with good manners, and she had both. She had about 3 children. The first ones were twins, but they very sadly died at birth, which devastated her greatly. And then she had a daughter whose company she very much enjoyed, but I think she very sadly died, a grown lady, but very sadly died before years ago, sadly. So she said, she even stated, even when you're an elderly person and you've had children who have very sadly died, even if they're no longer here, she stated that they are there, regardless of their death. They're there. They're in your mind. They're in your air. And she can be seen talking to herself, and people think she's crackers. And she says, "I'm not crackers. I'm only just thinking about my late children." Yes, she was interviewed by Life Hunters at the age of 103, fine age of 103. Yes. And this is not fictional. All these people and all this is an absolute fact, actually. But I know it sounds very story-like, but I thought, but this one is just well worth sharing. It's hugely endearing, worth endorsing, and incredibly interesting. Not for all, but for some individuals. And it's inspirational to me too, but not for all. I would perfectly understand it incredibly well. Oh, yes. Well, this is the episode of Foxy's Fun Inspirational Chats, with several more to come, and as you know, as much as you are looking forward to it, I am very, very much looking forward to it. I think it will be elating for more episodes to come, which I will do. Thanks indeed. If you want to watch the video of Life Lessons from 100-year-olds, if you don't know how to find it, I will link the video in the description below, so you can click on the link where it would say Life Lessons from 100-year-old video link. There will be a link underneath the title in the description. And if you just click the link, the video, you will just be, boom, straight to the video, and you'll be seeing it. And there will be some pictures of Cliff Crozier, John Millington Denerly, and Amelia Tereza Harper before the video ends, so that you two can have a see and of the people, those 3 endearing and interesting centenarians in Britain. And yes, of course, they were the 3 endearing and interesting centenarians. I certainly think so. Thanks so much indeed, everybody, and thanks for watching this episode of Foxy's Fun Inspirational Chats, and I will see you in the very, very next episode. Ta-ta, everybody, another time. From your friend Foxy.